We're going to take about 8 minutes here and talk with our old friend Sam Sachs, who is the co-founder of DistrictSentinel.com. Thank you. It's not the district, it's District Sentinel.
DistrictSentinel.com, but we go by the District Sentinel when you're just talking about
And
us.
you're in Washington, D.C., so other people don't have to be.
That's right. That's the motto. You got it.
It's a news co-op. People can join it. People can get their information there. They can specifically ask for reporters in Washington, D.C. to look into particular questions and things like that. So anyhow, so what's up? What are the stories?
So a few stories that the Sentinel's been working on this week. On the transparency front, we have 2 secret Department of Justice memos concerning when police can track the location of citizens that are set to be released from the Department of Justice, but not released to everybody else, only released to 2 members of Congress. This was an announcement that...
Wait a minute, I don't understand what
So the Department of Justice issued 2 secret memos about when police can track location information about citizens. This comes after 2012. There's a Supreme Court ruling, United States v. Jones, concerning when police attached a GPS device to a suspect's car.
Yeah, I remember.
They said that constitutes a search, and you need a warrant for that.
Right.
Well, that ruling was extremely narrow and only focused on GPS tracking devices affixed to cars. It didn't
affixed to the exterior of a car. In fact.
Right. Yeah. It didn't focus on all these other types of methods that police can track location through stingrays, which is what Victoria Jones just talked about in the segment previous. Through taking data out of people's OnStar navigational systems. There's looking at historical cell site data. So the Department of Justice, after Jones' ruling in 2012, moved forward with the secret memo to law enforcement about how they can collect location data in other ways besides this GPS
Here's how to get
device.
around the Supreme Court ruling, basically.
Exactly. The ACLU has been trying since this ruling to get a hold of these secret memos so that the public has a right to know how their location information is being used.
Well, wait a minute. If the memos went out to law enforcement all across the country...
Well, federal law enforcment. Oh,
so basically it went to the Secret Service and the FBI.
Internal Department of Justice memo. Exactly.
Okay.
They've been trying for 4 years to get this memo unearthed, brought to the public. The Department of Justice has resisted. This week, they're finally giving in a little bit, and they announced to Representative Jason Chaffetz, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and ranking member Elijah Cummings, that they will be able to see these memos and 2 staffers along with them, and that's it.
Whoa, it's shades of TPP.
Right.
But the good news, I guess, is Jason Chaffetz, even though he's a Republican from Michigan, he is one of the few Republicans who is sort of the... at least on Fourth Amendment issues.
He's a big civil libertarian on this issue.
He's in Rand Paul's camp. Yeah,
definitely. But just restricting it to only these 2 members didn't sit well with other members of the House Government Oversight Committee. Rep. Ted Lieu said that he found this. Let me get his right words here. He said it was offensive that he wouldn't be allowed to see these memos and it would affect his future dealings with the department. And Republican Rep. Thomas Massey from Kentucky said that he reminded the department that he's one of 435 members who control the purse strings of the department. And he advised a little bit more cooperation in the future.
Good luck trying to cut DOJ's funding.
Right.
I'm telling you.
So, maybe, that's a slight step forward for transparency, but clearly the fight's going to go on to get these memos broader, especially the implications. Now that people know what stingrays are, this is something that people learned of in the last year. Yeah. How more smart technology is deployed in cars and on devices that can really track where we're going.
Well, not only that, if the federal government is going to go to the trouble of coming up with standards that they consider to be constitutional, that they believe comport with the Supreme Court decisions and with the Fourth Amendment, then shouldn't those apply to every law enforcement agency in the country, not just the FBI?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem with stingrays is once the stingrays got in, of course, they're called all sorts of different things. I'm using that to refer to one model of cell site simulators. Once they got revealed, the federal government came forward and released guidelines to the public on how they were going to be used. But those only apply to federal police. They don't apply to local police. And there were a lot of loopholes that lawmakers have been concerned with for the last few months.
I predict within the next year or two, this is going to be before the Supreme Court in a big way.
Definitely. Yeah. It looks that way. Also on the transparency front, every year, members of Congress and their staff get about 3,000 Congressional Research Service reports. These are reports that deal with anything from military budgets to how the drone war program is going, to how many homeowners have obtained mortgage relief. Anything that the federal government is doing, there's data, there's reports. The Congressional Research Service has studied it, and these reports are usually only available to members of Congress and staff and other high-powered brokers and lobbyists who can subscribe to them and pay lots of money to get them.
Right.
Well, now there's an effort on Capitol Hill to release those to the public as well.
Oh, that would be nice.
This is from Senator Patrick Leahy and John McCain have sponsored legislation to do this. They're taxpayer funded. So,
I'll give you an example of this. When I was living in Vermont and I was writing Unequal Protection, Jim Jeffords was our Republican senator. And he had the Republican Party was pushing No Child Left Behind, and he left the party over that. And it was because he had commissioned a Congressional Research Service study that and you know, I met with his people, and it's in my book. I mean, you know, it's in the book. And they said, okay, the CRS looked at these this whole mandatory testing thing, and it's going to turn $1 million industry into $1 billion industry, and that's going to be its principal effect. It's not going to have a really consequential effect on education, and that made Jim Jeffords go nuts. And so I said, well, can I have a copy of this study to include in my book, or may I even have quotes from the study? And they were like, no, you can't see it. We can tell you in essence what it said, but you can't see it. It's against the law. This is only for members of Congress. And I until then, I had no idea that even, existed.
Yeah, I used to work on the Hill and used to rely on a lot of these reports for the work I did. And I was amazed that these were only available to people who work there. It's not like they contain sensitive information. It contained valuable information that people...
And they're paid for with our tax dollars.
Right. And a quick shout out to Stephen Aftergood. He's an investigative reporter with the Federation of American Scientists, and he does really good work on wrangling free a lot of these CRS reports and posting them online.
Cool.
So he'll have a little bit of a break if we can get this legislation passed, at least on that front. Another interesting story the Sentinel covered yesterday. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi had some. She slapped the press down a little bit for saying that the Democratic race is over for the president. She was asked, hey, isn't it time for Democrats to focus on the general and time for you to endorse former Secretary Hillary Clinton? And she said, no. She said, I have a great deal of respect for the voice of the American people, and there's 35 states that have not voted yet. And I think that it would be important to hear from them.
Yes.
That's a nice pushback against a lot of the media noise you hear.
Well, and she was also said words to the effect of, I'm not a fan of the superdelegates.
Exactly. That was going to be my next point, is that she said, I'm not a fan of the superdelegates, and she thinks that just the pledged delegates that are voting, that should determine who the nominee is eventually.
As it has in the past.
Right. And she admitted, though, that Bernie certainly has his work cut out for him, which he does. Yeah. And he's going to be looking at a couple of caucuses this weekend in Maine and Kansas and Nebraska, I believe. Yeah. Not much polling in those states, but according to the predicted markets, he's favored pretty heavily to win those states, actually.
That'll be interesting.
Hillary Clinton is still favored considerably to win the nomination, according to those same predicted markets. But I did notice they've dropped a few points since Super Tuesday. So that's interesting. Also, real quick, this hearing, there was a hearing on the situation in Libya, which has deteriorated considerably since the U.S. and NATO-led invasion in airstrikes in 2011 that led to the fall of the Gaddafi government. A member of Congress, though, Senator David Perdue, upon hearing witnesses talk about how grave the situation in Libya is, he said, sounds a lot like Washington.
Oh, jeez.
So that's the kind of mess that's happening in the Senate this week. Of course, this is a place where 4,000 people have died. The running massive deficits because they're not producing any of the oil that they were producing before the conflicts. There's two different opposing governments that claim ownership of Tripoli right now. So the comparison to Washington was not exactly apt, I'd say.
No, I don't. It was a wild exaggeration. But the reality of the damage that we did with this whole, regime change strategy in Libya.
Yeah, and the New York Times had a pretty good expose this week.
Oh, it was huge. The piece on Tuesday, in particular. So Sam Sachs with DistrictSentinel.com.
Yes, you got it.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for being with us. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.